So what happened on the client side and what led to the changes in the IP organization? A part of the company, it was a corporate divestiture, which means part of the company was sold. For the IP organization, that meant that suddenly they had a lower budget, they had to lower their costs, find efficiencies, also prepare for a new landscape, because partly the patents were owned, it was a joint IP ownership. So a lot of things happened within a very short period of time, and IP organization had to come up with a new patent strategy to face the new challenges. This is what we call, what could be called the central slide of this case study. Three pillars or three components of play an important part in patent cost management. And when I say cost management, it also has to do with risk management. I'll explain a little bit why. What's also important to note is that the three steps are not steps in a chronological order, but for some organizations it could make sense to do step 2 first, and then step 3, and then step 1, or maybe do 2 of these steps at the same time. That depends on your individual organization. So what do we mean by the coordination of case management? Case management, coordination. To give you an example, when we think about a PCT, National Phase Entry Plan, what this organization did was, among other things, they determined fairly strict timelines to follow with regards to PCT National Phase. So between the IP organization and the business units and the stakeholders on that side, they had certain tasks that had to be fulfilled by a certain timeline. And the details you can see here, I don't want to go through everything in great detail. And depending on the phase, the main tasks are either on the patent management side or on the business unit side. Establishing these timelines can be very tough in the beginning, because it means you're establishing new rules and you have to live by those rules. In the long term, though, we are pretty confident, and that's what our clients saw. It will yield great benefits. Some of these benefits are listed here. With the establishing of rules such as these timelines, it's likely that you will have a simplified budgeting process. You will have more time to review your application. It's less likely that you'll miss a filing deadline, especially if all your service providers also follow these deadlines. Rush fees can be avoided, and batch filings. That means you file a number of applications at the same time, not one by one. So all these aspects, in an ideal world, should lead to a much simpler process, reduced cost, and also reduced risk. With a more complex scenario, you will always run a higher risk, because think of some kind of external influence that has a deep impact on your IP planning process. If the process is too complex, it's hard to change in the short term. Step 2 in this playbook, in this case study, is called prioritizing. By prioritizing, we mean to prioritize the jurisdictions in which you file a patent. What this means, or what this meant on the client side when they first started with it, all the stakeholders sat together for a fairly long period of time, and they did a detailed analysis of their jurisdictions, evaluated the market value, the enforceability, and all the related costs in that context. After finishing the analysis, they had a plan in place. They had let's call them tier 1 countries, tier 2 countries, and maybe tier 3 countries. And this allowed them to basically give individual decision makers, individual attorneys, more power, for example, to file that a patent would always be filed in Tier 1, but not in Tier 2 and Tier 3 countries. And that meant there's very little need for individual discussion or alignment with regard to the Tier 1 countries, because that would be a no-brainer always. So that, again, is a simplified process. It's quicker, and it avoids risk in the sense that you file patents in jurisdictions of low value. A couple of benefits from prioritizing of the jurisdictions. After doing the initial analysis, you will have a reduced analysis, a reduced administrative burden of analyzing. You will run a lower risk, as I already mentioned, of low-value filings. Ultimately, you would also see an increased budget predictability, because you will, to a fairly large extent, you will know in which jurisdictions you will file the majority of your patents. Now, the last step is called centralization. As I said before, it doesn't necessarily have to be the last step. It could be step number 2, or several steps could be taken at the same time. Translation can be a substantial part of the prosecution process, can be a substantial part of the budget as well. Therefore, it's worth taking a look at. In terms of risk, why is translation a risk? Most patent managers will have come across translation errors in their prosecution process. Translation errors can lead to office actions. There's various studies that show that this happens quite frequently. So in terms of managing risk here, what you want to do is you want to make sure you're working with the right partners. You want to make sure you have the right process in place, most of all, to avoid risk. And when you go a little bit deeper into this aspect, translation in patents is usually a human translation. It's not a machine translation. And therefore, humans make mistakes. Machines sometimes make mistakes too, by the way. But since humans make mistakes, there's no absolute guarantee that the quality will always be consistent. Therefore, what you want to do is, apart from choosing the right translators, also choosing the right process and the right technology also helps to improve quality in the long term. There are other services around translation, such as, for example, EP validations, where that can also be done through a centralized process. All aspects ultimately should help to make your overall patent management more efficient. The benefits of centralizing: you have improved on-time delivery, as I explained, with the help of the right people, the right process, and the right technology in place. You will have, over time, increased consistency and quality. Therefore, minimize the risk of, for example, translation-related office actions or litigation cases. And in an ideal world, you will also be able to save money and be able to use that budget for additional jurisdictions. Back to the individual client case in this here, the business impact that the client saw in year 1 after they implemented these changes. They saved $830,000. They were more aligned with the business strategy, and they had what I tried to explain before. They had an increased budget predictability. Last but not least, this was a US company, and it was important for them to achieve an improved work-life balance for the employees within the IP organization, and employee surveys ultimately proved that they also achieved this goal. So overall, a win-win for everybody. And with this, I'd like to end my presentation. Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Schafers. Are there any questions from the audience for this presentation? I have one question myself. If you are going to centralize these kind of activities, is there not a risk of capacity at the moment of centralization?
A risk of capacity of not finding enough resource to, for example, to perform the translations. You mean? Yeah. I wouldn't think so. There's a big universe of qualified people out there, and technology gets better and better every day. What we do, we don't use machine translation as such, but we use technology to support the translation, to make the work of the translator quicker, but also achieve higher quality by using memory and various other things to help improve the quality.
Okay, thank you.